I paused because I hear these cedars creaking, and I'm asking God, why did it take so long for me to get this? And I looked up at the cedars creaking, and like the big ones weren't creaking, they were solid. It was the little ones that were like going back and forth in the wind, and I could hear him say, it's so I could thicken your trunk so you could handle the winds at where I'm going to take you. So all of this hard stuff, that season of hard stuff, was my development years. They were my development years.
Well, hey friends, welcome to the Found Podcast. I'm Lorie, and I'm really glad you joined me. We have had an incredible season. I'm going to say, just to give you a heads up, that we're going to be taking a wee break after today's interview, and may I say, you saved the best for last. You're going to meet one of my dear friends, an inspiring leader, I would say a world changer, and you're going to be really equipped in this conversation because today I have the thrill of welcoming Angie Peters to the podcast. As I said, Angie's an inspiring leader. She's a passionate advocate. She is someone who is truly reshaping the way we respond to poverty. Even at her wedding, I took, the liberty of saying that her and her husband, Arthur, are going to solve the poverty around the world. We'll just say that. And I'm not joking. After leaving a successful career, Angie was once involved in telecommunications. She followed God's call to serve the communities where she grew up. And she's now the president and CEO of Yonge Street Mission in Toronto, Canada, where she's leading bold collaborative efforts to end long-term poverty. Angie recently released her powerful new book. It's called Just Act. It is fantastic. And the subtitle is We Are the Solution to Poverty. So you're going to be challenged today as you consider those in need and what your role is. And I'm just looking forward to having a great conversation with my friend. Welcome to the Found Podcast, Angie. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Lorie. It's great to be here with you. And I know the other people you've interviewed, so I don't know if you've saved the best for last, but I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, honestly, you're definitely going to be one of the best. I know that for sure. We've done this a few different ways, haven't we, Ange? You've been on TV. I've interviewed you when I was at 700 Club Canada. You've been on The Perspective with me. So thank you for just showing up in all the places. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Always.
Well, we're going to get started, Ange, and this podcast really dives into people's stories because I believe that that's honestly this conversation of identity and finding our purpose really goes back to our growing up years, right? We are formed so much in our young years. So tell us a little bit about who was Angie? What was your sense of identity growing up? And, how did you first come to know Jesus? That's a lot to answer, but just start with your story as a young girl, where you grew up and who you were.
Okay. Well, I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, but pretty quickly with a short stop in Montreal, we ended up in downtown Toronto. So I grew up quite near where I currently serve at Yonge Street Mission, just a number of city blocks away. And living in a rental house in Riverdale, when Riverdale was not Riverdale. It was a little rundown, and the Don jail just down the street was still in operation. And my mom was raising us. And so I have a brother, older brother, younger sister. So I'm the middle child of three. And we're living in this rental house and kind of doing our thing and growing up in that context. And my mom was a fabulous mother, just really loved us to death, and really all the neighborhood kids too. So pretty much everybody called her mom. But there were some challenges, right? And I think they influenced my identity. We were, because of a long story, but some challenges in my mom's life, she ended up having us with three different men. And so she was raising us, and we don't really look alike. We kind of all look like the milkmans. And I'm of mixed race. And so when I was young, I used to get, back in the days when you play until the streetlights come on. And so I would get quite dark in the summer. And my siblings are both, have no pigment, like a dark pigment, they're white. And so part of my growing up experience actually was being told multiple times by other children that I must be adopted. And so really kind of having this sense of not feeling like, maybe there was a question there, and I'd ask my mom, and she said, no. And of course she's right. I wasn't adopted. But feeling like, there was something wrong there. about me, about my origins, about our origins because of the different parentage, and sort of walked around with this, illegitimate kid from the wrong side of the tracks identity, right? Not a healthy identity. But frankly, because of my mom's woundedness, hers wasn't so different. And so it was the family that we were in. And there was lots of love, not a lot of resources, and some trauma. And so how did I find Jesus? And it really starts with how my mom found Jesus, because she really, like the story goes, she always wanted to learn how to play piano. So she got lessons for her daughter. So somehow she figured out how to get someone to give me piano lessons. And because my mom suffered from agoraphobia and was afraid to leave the house, at the tender age of 6, I toddled on off to piano lessons all by myself. And the piano teacher thought that was a bit odd, and she was a woman of faith and a caregiving type personality. And so she decided to reach out to my mom, and through that intentional investment of this like ordinary person in community, they formed a relationship. She helped her find healing and her faith, and really believe that she was worth something and that her life could change. So it was a very key turning point for my mother. And so she found her faith, and so then she became, this will date me, a Good News Bible Club teacher out of our house. So she was already a babysitter. That was one of the ways that she made ends meet. And so there's always kids in our house, and everybody called her mom. And so there was just all these kids in our house all the time, and she did a Good News Bible Club. And so that's how I came to know Jesus. And so I think I was maybe 7 when I bowed and said the prayer, and that was the beginning of my journey with Jesus.
I mean, wow, I know there's so much more in this story. And certainly you talk a bit about your mom's journey, which is beautiful, isn't it? It's tender. It's like this beautiful person, but a person who experienced a lot of trauma that led to some of her own choices. What about growing up without a dad? Did that impact your sense of identity, your value and worth?
Yeah, I mean, there was a stepfather in the picture for a season, and that was complicated in and of itself. So he was my younger sister's dad. So it wasn't like there wasn't ever anybody in the picture, but it was more like they were just there. They weren't my dad, and so I was so sort of fatherless. So I think that's a part of how my relationship with God, transformed. I mean, people relate to God in different ways, but I really valued the father image of God. That was part of how I connected with him. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautiful. Your independence, man, you are a strong woman. I can definitely attest to that. Do you think some of this, like your mom had a lot of fears, really couldn't leave the house, as you said. And what did that do to you? You at 6 years old, you're going down to the street to have piano lessons. Like, do you think some of your independence and that was formed out of that too? Yeah, I mean, I think we did, it impacted all 3 of us in different ways, but I think myself as the eldest female, it led to a lot of household responsibilities, including for a long time looking after my younger sister, who's 5 years younger than me. In fact, funny story. My mom used to like, the Sears catalog, ordering stuff at the Sears catalog. That was the thing. She would order us matching outfits. So I was even like 5 years older and in the same clothes as my younger sister for a long time, until I kind of said, Mom, I don't think this is fair. And to her credit, she said, yes, you're right. And she stopped. But I think that I had responsibilities at a very young age that are not typical for a little girl. And I don't think, a couple of them I resented and spoke to her about, and she was actually pretty cool about that in terms of how she reacted to it. But I don't really think I thought about it much. It was just my life.
Exactly. So you're growing up, you've come to Jesus at a young age, and it's definitely been a journey for you as you've grown in your faith. And you went through some bumpy teenage years. Tell us about what happened in your teenage years.
Yeah, so shortly after my mom kind of got some strength, we ended up moving to a new neighborhood. And the trigger to a new neighborhood meant that we weren't going to church anymore, because we were bused to church in our old neighborhood and was connected to the piano teacher, right?
I mean, good old Sunday school bus system, right? Like we can't underestimate how many kids were reached with those bus roads.
Yeah. So we moved to the new neighborhood, no connection to a church. My mom had no connection to anybody. And so we just stopped going to church. So I had this identity of being Christian. It meant something to me. I mean, I was baptized at a young age when, in a Baptist church where you went through the interviews and all that sort of thing. And I got the special dress and was baptized at a very young age. So it was embedded in my identity, but then I went into this reality where I'm now 9, there's no church in my life, and I'm just growing up. And I was a generally pretty good kid, but, I dated and I partied a little bit and stuff like that. And I remember I was dating this boy. It was hilarious. And he said to me, you say you're a Christian, but you don't act like one. And,
wow.
He wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong. And so after I broke up with him, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't break up with him right away. But we did eventually break up, obviously. But after that point in time, actually God used that. And I started to go back to church. And I actually grabbed my little sister with me. And we went down to the corner of Kennedy and Ellesmere where there was a church there, a Baptist church, and started to go to church together.
You know what? It's interesting, eh? Like, you can run, but you cannot hide from the love of God.
Yeah.
And like, even a boyfriend can help you get back in the doors of a church.
Yeah.
So what happened? You met your first husband, John, at a young, like you were in your teenage years. And you said when you got married, you were kind of two broken people. I know I'm fast forwarding the story a bit, but tell me about those years.
Yeah, I mean, I was back at church, but it was sort of the days where you decide whether or not you want to go to church on Sunday or to the bar baseball league and play baseball. That level of, integration. And so I met my husband that way. And so, there was still, when you think about my upbringing, stuff I hadn't resolved, and certainly in his life that he hadn't resolved. And so he's a good man. I'm not going to, say anything negative about him. He's the father of my children and really, truly a good man. But we kind of made a mess of things because neither of us were healthy. It was sort of like, I remember our pastor back in the day when we did the Before You Say I Do classes, right? He said, a good marriage, he goes like this, a good marriage is like this, where you're both pointing up at God and you choose to join your life in a healthy way. This is not so healthy, because then you're leaning on each other and, you're kind of pointing toward God, but you're not fully, in your life of following God as how you're each individually gifted, and doing that together moving forward, you're kind of leaning on each other. And so I've always remembered that. And I think we were this.
Like codependent, would that be the word?
Yeah. So we both needed to heal, I think. And I went through a season of healing and had a spiritual director, and it was painful as all of those things are, but really, really good, and changed my life dramatically.
Yeah. And for various reasons, I don't know how much you feel you want to share or need to share about that marriage and what happened, but 25 years were you married, and around
28.
then? And
28.
28. Wow. 28. Tell us about that. How that impacted you, that marriage ending.
Well, it's really hard.
Yeah.
I think when you're in a difficult marriage and you're a Christian, if you're raised the way I was raised, and in the kind of churches I attended, you don't believe you're allowed to leave unless something really egregious is happening. And while it was, kind of not a healthy marriage and had negative aspects to it, I don't want to get into too much detail there, but I didn't feel like I had the right. I wasn't allowed to leave. I had to live. I made my bed. I have to live with it, right? And so it took some extreme events and really, the support of godly people that I trusted to help me get to the point where I didn't believe that I was dishonoring God in stepping away. So that was a long season getting there. It was probably like 3 years of getting to that point, just wrestling through that before I was able to make that decision and leave. And it was really good for me, really good for the kids. And they still have a relationship with their dad. That's really important. And so we're all moving forward in sort of greater health as a result of that.
Yeah. And I was in your life in that part of your journey, Angie, and I can just testify that, like, very difficult thing. I really respected how you really genuinely want to honor God. You even wanted to honor your husband and your children. And I really respect how you navigated that. A very difficult time. You end up single. Now you're single again. And like, who's Angie now? Like, there was quite a transition in your life. You do things with such grace, though. I just see all through your life, even when things are tough for you, you really do things with grace. And what I mean by that is you really genuinely want to honor God, but you also want to honor people. You're very thoughtful in your decision making. And I saw that in that season. When you look back, what was a great one, maybe one great lesson you learned in that time?
I actually learned people are quite gracious too, right? So part of when I made the decision, I was leading Yonge Street Mission, which is a Christian organization. And I think when I got the role, part of the package was that I'd been married for a long time and I was, this, ideal Christian married person. And I actually thought they might ask me to resign when I made that decision. And I was ready for it. I was like, okay, well, this is what I got to do. So I found incredible grace from the Christian community around me. I didn't actually expect that. I didn't really get anybody that treated me the way I thought I would be treated for leaving my marriage. Everybody was actually really gracious. So I think that's sort of the biggest unexpected thing that came out of that season for me. And that's a very good thing.
It is. It is a good thing. And I mean, for some listening, they're maybe feeling what you're feeling. They're in a difficult marriage and working maybe in a ministry setting. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we feel like we got to please all the people around us, right? But I honor you even as I witnessed how you honored God and others in that and showed grace. And I'm glad that you were able to receive grace. And your daughter's name is Grace. So that's also, grace is clearly a theme in your life. But here you are, you're now like CEO of Yonge Street Mission. I mean, you left a huge job. You were a big time executive. When I first met you, I mean, you've done many things, but you were an executive in telecommunications. And yet you had this in your career, you always had this shift in your heart to like a ministry calling, is it? Just a desire to help other people. You started a Zoe ministry. Like, tell me what happened in those years when your sort of career to your calling, can we call it that? Like, you had a job, but you had this calling. Can you, what happened? How did that shift in your purpose in your life there, especially when you started Zoe? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first part, the shift occurred after my youngest was born, and I went back to work. And at that point, I was fairly senior at the telecom firm. And I don't know, I just had a dissonance with it. I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up anyway. And so this all just kind of happened. And I had a dissonance with it. It's not them. They weren't a bad organization. It was me. And at the same time, in my Bible study group, we were studying Ephesians. And so you know how sometimes you can read a verse that you've read so many times before, but this time it just kind of hits you right between the eyes because you're asking God about something. And so Ephesians 2:10 says that he created good works in advance for us to do. And I thought, okay, God, well, since I've never known what I wanted to do when I grew up, and apparently you've created something good in advance for me to do, I can't probably think of anything better than you have prepared for me. So if you show me, I will do it. And that began the long journey through various steps and stages to where I am now. So I highly advocate for that prayer. Now, it is a dangerous prayer. It will change everything about your life, but it's a good way to have it changed. And that, you know, so there's a couple of steps, but I ended up at a certain point realizing that, you know, I was working, at first I worked for a hospital and did capital campaign, and then I worked for a ministry at camp doing their foundation. But even while I was there, I was like, yeah, God, this is good, but this isn't it, right? And so that's when the vision for Zoe was sort of downloaded on me, and that was to help people internationally with sort of my skill set, marketing and sales, but in a way that helps build employment and development for people in developing nations was what was laid on my heart. And I was 40 at the time. Funny, 40, right? Biblical year.
Yeah.
So I was on a retreat at Manresa, my favorite place in the world where God exists. And of course, he's everywhere, but I really connect with him there. Nature, spiritual pathway. And I was doing a retreat. And I was it was a happy retreat. I was kind of rejoicing over the fact that this really exciting vision for Zoe was in my heart. And I was going down that path. And at the same time, I was saying to God, I was like, why did it take me so long, God? Like, I thought I was kind of smart. And why did it take me so long to figure out what you wanted me to do? And at the same time, I'm heading back to the retreat house up the hill because the winds have picked up. And even with the music in my ears, I could hear the big cedars creaking in the wind. I thought, I got to move because it's coming. The storm is coming. But I paused because I hear these cedars creaking, and I'm asking God, why did it take so long for me to get this? And I looked up at the cedars creaking, and like the big ones weren't creaking. They were solid. It was the little ones that were like going back and forth in the wind. And I could hear him say, not audibly, but in my head, I could hear him say, it's so I could thicken your trunk so you could handle the winds at where I'm going to take you. And I was like, whoa. So all of this hard stuff, that season of hard stuff, was my development years. They were my development years. And he was preparing me for where he was going to take me next. And so that was just a beautiful season heading into where I was going to go next. And yeah, there were some big challenges starting up Zoe. Like if you've ever started a business, it's not easy. And I was the sole income earner for my family. It's a pretty high risk endeavor. And so I needed a thick trunk, as it turned out.
Yeah. Tell us just quickly what Zoe is. Like, what did it do?
Yeah. So Zoe Alliance was a for-profit social enterprise that I founded. And the idea was to work with Indigenous business leaders in developing nations and help them grow their businesses so that they could provide stable employment for the people in the villages. And what Zoe was, my company itself actually did, was sold promotional products that were socially sourced in North America, but they'd be made by the businesses of these people in the various villages. So they'd come with this great story card and sometimes a video. And so businesses could know that it wasn't just T-shirts or pens or conference bags. It was something that actually helped employ people who were working very hard to provide for their families.
Yeah. And when I watched you in that season, first of all, in awe, as when you do something, you throw yourself into it. You went all in.
There's no small.
And right, there's no small. But I just saw this heart for really this. You had an angst to help people in long-term poverty. Right there, I saw this calling on your life. Like, why did that matter to you? Where did this desire and this heart for helping people that were stuck in cycles of long-term poverty? Because really, that's what Zoe was doing. It was helping people internationally. Where did that come from, Ange?
Well, I think from my family history, right? Like we're all like when we go through that process of discernment in terms of what we're going to do, which is a process I went through after sort of the Ephesians 2:10 moment. If you go through sort of your shape, your spiritual gifts, your heart, your abilities, your personality, and your experience, and how can I be used, right? And how, God, do you want to use me? Part of my history is coming out of a family of multiple generations of poverty, right? And so knowing what that looks like really knowing what that looks like, because they're family members, gives you a sense of, you might look at it from the outside and fair enough, if you've never been exposed to poverty, how could you understand? You might think think things about people who are poor that aren't accurate because you don't really understand it. Mm-hmm. But we're all human. We're all made in God's image. We all have the same desires, dreams, hopes for our lives. And it's just some people, they're planted in concrete and some are planted in really healthy soil. And that influences how well you're able to grow.
Tell us the story of your mom and how the poverty cycle was really broken in your family. You share it in your book, Just Act. It's actually I think, one of the most profound stories in understanding not only why you wrote the book, but just how poverty, the cycle of poverty, was broken in your own family. Tell us her story.
Yeah. Well, my mom's name was Barbara, and she was the oldest of 11 children, and her dad was an alcoholic. So, don't know his backstory, but he regularly abused the boys and girls in different ways, and that's the household she grew up in. And at a young age, even though she really loved school and was very good at it, she was pulled out of school to work and help support the family and to raise the younger siblings, which she did. So that was like, she was born to be a mom. Like, she loved kids. And so at a certain point, she wanted to have a family of her own. And that's when she kind of made the decision to go back that in a way that wasn't ideal for her or anybody else, and led to the three of us coming from three different men. But that was like, that's lack of sense of value. That's all of those things, right? That contribute to that sort of a decision. And the environment she ended up in, which I talked about a little earlier, where she had depression. Well, if you don't think you're worth anything, right? And she had the fear of going out and all of that. And so all of that came from that. And so it was really, the just act side of the book is, the piano teacher and Pat, and the truth that ordinary people, any of us, can do something that we really think is nothing. And it's that point in time in that person's life that helps them take that next step in their journey. And we don't have to worry about the step after that, because somebody else will be there to take that step. I think we feel like we've got to solve the whole problem, and we don't know how to solve the whole problem. That's overwhelming, so we don't do anything. But the reality is we all just need to do something. I talk about a bucket brigade, right? Like everybody, the old-fashioned bucket brigade where everybody lines up and puts the fire out. If you just figure out what's in your bucket and be comfortable with, this is it. This is the thing I know how to do. And I'm just going to be always doing this for somebody in my life. And I'm going to trust that all the other buckets are out there lined up to do their part in that person's life. If we all did it, that is the thing that really helps people like Pat and the piano teacher. They couldn't have done what the other did.
Right.
I don't believe Pat was a Christian.
So tell us about Pat, because I don't think you've mentioned him.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
At this point.
So
piano teacher stepped in.
Piano teacher
first,
stepped in, and then we moved to a different neighborhood. And then Pat is the mother of a little boy, Richard, that plays with my brother Dave. And they meet. And my mom says, I kind of want to go back to work again, but I'm afraid and I don't know how. And Pat just helped her figure that out. What did you like? What were you good at school? What do you enjoy doing? Helped her find bookkeeping courses, took the bookkeeping courses. And then lo and behold, when that was all done, she hired her.
Yeah.
And so you go from for that starting point of stuck in a house in a bad neighborhood with 3 kids and afraid to leave, to working outside the home and providing for your family, because 2 ordinary people just did their one thing that they really didn't think was any big deal at all. And everything's changed. Everything's changed.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the podcast. If you like what you're experiencing so far, would you like, share, follow, subscribe, all this stuff, because this helps more people be part of this journey with us. And now we have an opportunity for you to be able to actually donate to this ministry. Lorie Hartshorn Ministries is officially a charity. So go to loriehartshorn.com/donate and join us today so we can share the message of Found with more people. Now back to the conversation. I'm so touched every time I hear that story. Sorry, I said he, but it was she, Pat. Every time I hear that story, I think, like, the piano teacher was just doing her thing. Pat was just really being a friendly neighbor. But she did take effort to help your mom in tangible ways, like, to connect her with people, to connect her with courses. Like, I just love the beauty of that, Angie, because it's true. When I even I always say you're going to solve, world poverty. Well, who can? Nobody can.
Yeah.
But together, to your illustration, if we all did our part, we'd make such a difference. And that's what happened in your own family. Like, you've lived this experience. And I just, when I see the work you've done over the years, I do believe there's just this built-in, not only God calling in your life, but he equipped you for it from a very young age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? And that is like when I always say, when you know who you are And that's, like you said, the shape, even your personality, your gifts, your experience, all those things. When you know who you are, you know what to do then.
Yeah.
And here you are now, like continuing to step out to really speak about, train people, equip people. You're leading Yonge Street Mission. But there was a time when you felt you were too small, like you had a too small mentality, or maybe we all do it, right? Mm-hmm. How do you overcome, I can't really make a difference, or, I don't feel like I have enough to offer, or how did you overcome that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So when I was transitioning into the Yonge Street Mission role, I'd been on the board, and then I stepped off the board to candidate for this role, and that was a long interview process. And between some past experiences and how that whole process went, it sort of gave me messages that I wasn't big enough, like I maybe wasn't a strong enough leader or able to take this on. There were some messages, not a lot, but a few that were impactful to me coming at me. And then...
And just to clarify, those messages, it wasn't like specifically people had said them, but they were just beliefs that you were caring about yourself. Is that right?
No, people said them.
Okay.
People said them. And so it was interesting. And so that finds any insecurities you may have already had in yourself, right? And takes them out. And so I was on retreat at Manresa, and this was after I'd actually been given the job before I started. I'm walking around the woods and just processing all this before I start trying to get myself ready and to head in. Feeling a little intimidated because I was taking over for a larger-than-life leader that had been in the role for 23 years before me. Lovely person. It's not his fault that he's larger than life. It's just that's intimidating, right? And feeling quite small. And I'm not a poet, but I've written one poem in my life. And it was after that day, that walk in those woods, with a sort of a sense of encouragement from Jesus as I was walking through. So it's short. I can read it to you.
Yeah, do.
Okay. So it's called Though I Am Small. I stand among the giant cedars, and I know I'm small. Your light breaches the fortress of treetops and bids me welcome. The arms of the forest bring peace in their embrace. Your truths are gifts carried by the melody of gentle waters. The fragrance of your presence floods my soul with joy. Though I am small, I stand among the giant cedars, and I know I am loved, I am whole, we stand tall.
Wow.
And it was sort of the moment of, I'm putting you there. God saying, I'm putting you there. You're going to do it, and you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to do it on your knees, and you're going to do it with me. So it's going to be okay. So it sort of was my be strong and courageous moment, but it turned into this poem.
That is so beautiful. I'm sure there's people listening, and we've all been there to some degree, whether it was said directly to us or we have carried insecurities of our own, fears in our life. I mean, I've felt many times I'm unqualified. Like, why? And one of my things in my own head is like, why would anyone listen to me? Which is so interesting since the path that I've taken primarily is communications, right? It's like, but I have this thing like, why would anyone listen to me? And that goes deep into my own growing up experience of feeling not heard. And like, there's lots of reasons why we might carry some of these things. And to your point, some people said these things to you, but we have to overcome these lies, don't we? We have to, or even if they're other people's viewpoints, we have to overcome them. And I watch in your life, Angie, something you've taught me is the time that you take. You schedule it in your calendar. You take time to listen to God. And this Manresa retreat center that you would go to, I just love your example to me and how you will make a discipline of hearing from God. And I have witnessed in your life that you do act like whatever he tells you, you're like, well, okay, I'm going to do it. Mm. What is the power? What is the impact of that discipline? Can I call it a discipline of having set aside time to hear from God? What does it look like for you?
Yeah. Well, it is a spiritual discipline, I think, and an important one. I mean, it's what God wants. He wants for us to be. It's what He longs for us to be in relationship with Him, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's the impact is strength, courage, clarity. Clarity is a big one. Like, I can't tell you how many times I would take a challenge I was facing with my leadership or in the work that I do, or some kind of decision, and just go there totally confused and come back with great clarity, right? So it's a source of wisdom. He says, if you need wisdom, ask and He will give it to you, right? And so it's a source of wisdom. Yeah, I don't think I could. I don't think I'd be a very good leader at all if I didn't do that.
Tell us what it looks like practically.
Well, it has changed.
Is it once a month? Is it? Yeah, it changes through seasons.
It changes through seasons. So I would like to go back to the once a month season. I'm having a hard time making that happen. So it's a little more like others I know have done it, which is more like a couple times with a larger block of time. Mm-hmm. So I've got one planned in the summer months where I'll just go for a few days. And so I would actually prefer going back to the more frequent, but it's just not fitting into my life right now. So I've got my morning routine and sort of these every so often a few days is how I'm doing it now.
Yeah. Well, it's a great example. And I know for myself too, that when you hear from God, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. It changes who you are internally, what you believe about yourself, but it also just enables you to do the thing that He's asking you to do. And to me, it is directly connected to identity because, I can have this view of myself or of God, but when I hear from Him directly, when I experience Him in my own life, it just propels me to keep going, like to do the thing that He's asked me to do, to not compare myself to others, to not have to be someone I'm not, but to actually be the person God called me to be. Mm-hmm. And I see that in your life, Angie, that you've really continued to step into being the person God called you to be. And you're impacting a lot of people. I know you don't love to toot your own horn, so I'm going to toot it for you. But this book, Just Act, didn't just happen. It really was at your leadership at Yonge Street Mission, and you're doing your, correct me if I'm wrong, but your master's at the same time, right? And you launched this initiative called a poverty hackathon. It sparked this citywide momentum. How have you seen God move when people come together and they act justly and they love mercy? And tell us a little bit about that movement and what it's done in the city of Toronto, which is a big city for those listening around the world, millions of people, and lots of challenges.
Yeah, so it's really cool, right? Even the process of pulling the group together, because it's multi-sectoral, it's leadership, from different walks. Certainly not all Christians. I don't even know everybody's status, to be sure, on that front. But they all care, and they want to do something good.
Yeah.
And they know we're Christian. But that's not central. That's not what it's about. It's about us doing this thing for the poor. And I think God likes to use His people who are not Christians yet to be involved in this kind of, in His kingdom building work, really, which is what we're trying to do. And it's so fun to watch people learn, really accomplished people choose to learn, to submit themselves to the learning from the people with lived experience that we've put in charge.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're in charge, right? The people who are currently experiencing poverty.
So just tell us what it looked like, because you had people that are experiencing poverty on a panel.
Yeah.
Correct? And people came to the room, all these, some of them big time business people, Bay Street in Toronto, variety of sectors, to hear their story, correct?
Well, not just to hear their story. That was part of the leading up to it before they got in the room. They actually came ready to roll up their sleeves and try to come up with solutions that would help people like the panel.
Right.
So things that they could take back and do in their spheres that would make a difference. So they submitted themselves to the authority of the individuals with lived experience to try to come up with something that these leaders would tell us would really make a difference, so that our activities aren't misguided. We've heard of well-intended initiatives that lead to poor outcomes because we didn't really understand. So they submitted themselves to getting that understanding so that they could come up with something that would make a difference. And that's led to these 3 working groups that are still going to their 3rd year of effort, working on the 3 initiatives that the parents prioritized to try to lead to real systems change in this city, that it wouldn't just impact those parents, but pretty much everybody experiencing poverty.
Wow. And what are those 3 initiatives? What were those 3 areas?
Yeah. So they are, one is working on coming up with a financially viable plan to build deeply affordable housing at scale. And I emphasize that actually for the readers, because we hear all this affordable housing stuff out there. It's all over the news. I want to make a distinction. Nobody's actually trying to build deeply affordable housing. That's what's needed. Deeply affordable housing is housing where the rent is geared to the person's income. So, extreme example, but if your income is $100, you're going to pay 30% in rent. So your rent's going to be $30. So it gives somebody some margin to invest in other things, to grow it, to buy their food and that sort of thing. Affordable housing is at a higher level of rent that most people who are really experiencing poverty can't afford. And then market housing is even above that. So any housing that's being built that's market or affordable is good and part of the solution in our city for the housing crisis, but it's not addressing the needs of the poorest among us.
Right.
It's important to understand that. So this group is trying to come up with a plan to address that need, because nobody's actually working on that. So that's one group. The other group is working on income and benefits. So they're looking at strategies. They're entering into a pilot right now where we are building a 4-phase model that talks about if someone is currently very distant from the workplace for various reasons, there's 4 phases they go through to being in a place where they're consistently gainfully employed and able to progress in their career. So we've broken that down and identified, so employers could look at it and say, well, I can't help employ people at this phase, but I can help employ people at that phase, and make it easy for employers so it's demystified. Because you usually talk to employers and say, I can't employ a poor person, because they're instantly envisioning that person on the subway who's really deeply troubled and going, I don't know what to do with that. I can't employ her. But so we're breaking it down, demystifying it, and showing people, well, of course you can't go there because that person needs a lot of care before they're ready even for the first step. But there's a whole bunch of other people living in poverty that are ready for these other 4 steps, and you can find a place to employ one of them. And so we're trying to build a larger ecosystem of employers that can see the way that they can participate and still take care of their business. And so that's the other one. And then the third one is access to community support. So today, there are supports that it's hard for people to get at, and they're doing a pilot that's training local residents to know how they can be system navigators for people in their neighborhood. So if I'm someone and I'm in TCHC, Toronto Community Housing, and I'm about to get kicked out, but my English isn't very good and I don't know how to use a computer, I don't know how to self-advocate, there's someone over here who's been trained and they're volunteering, and then you can go talk to them and they'll help you navigate all that so you don't get kicked out, that kind of thing.
You know, it's fantastic because it's, well, to the title of your book, Just Act, it's very tangible. And are you seeing, I know it's a big problem, but are you seeing the needle move?
I mean, right now, the challenge is that poverty since the pandemic has continued to go up. That's the challenge. And people talk about our system, and I know that if you're not in the system, you might have different perceptions about the system. Like some people think maybe we're giving people too much money and we're incenting them to stay on social supports and stuff like that. But, you know, the book breaks it down in detail, but it's just simply not true. Actually, the system has been underinvested in since the 80s. So as a result of that, if you're on social income supports right now, your income is generally between 20 and 60% below the poverty line.
Wow.
Like what you're getting is maybe 60% below the poverty line as your social benefit payments. So it's at the level of which meal do I skip and which bill do I pay and how do I live till tomorrow and can I feed my kids kind of level of payment. And we claw it back before they even get to the poverty line if they earn any income on the side. So it kind of keeps people stuck. So there's things like that make it a harder situation, and that's why we're trying to do the things to get policy change and help people understand things so that we can, help people proceed out of poverty. But at the moment, it's not a good story. We do see people progressing out, but there's more people falling back in the bucket than getting out at the moment.
Well, I guess even to that, thank you for what you're doing as you continue to really you're a mobilizer of people. You're continuing to mobilize people in this. You're just acting. You're doing the thing, right? That's right in front of you. Even from your place of influence and leadership, but you're mobilizing others. The book, Just Act, I love. We are the solution to poverty. It's a very practical book. You give tools and resources to people. Like, what's your hope for the reader as they read this book? What's sort of the takeaway? How can each one of us participate, or like be the piano teacher, be Pat the neighbor, like be the business person who's now thinking strategically about how they can participate? But what's your main message in this book?
I think it's don't worry too much about fixing the whole problem. Right? Connect with your heart. What breaks your heart about poverty? And then go learn a little bit about what would be helpful to those people. So like go volunteer a little bit, you don't have to commit forever. Just do a little learning so that and in that learning process, the magic happens, right? I've seen it time and again. People volunteer for a little bit and they're like, oh, I could do that.
Right.
And then and then they've really learned what's in their bucket. Like learn what's in your bucket and then just develop a plan. You could just, like, we've got people who volunteer at a computer lab, for example, 2 staff, thousands of children every year. And a lot of the people, they're corporate volunteers, and they come in and they say, yeah, I'll teach a class for an hour a week for 3 months. And there's a story in the book about a little man named Ram, whose whole life changed because of one of those volunteers. And now he went through our bursary program, he finished university, he's out working, and he's helping other kids like him. And it's this volunteer who did an hour a week for 3 months has no idea that he inspired a little man named Ram to do what he's currently doing. So we don't have to solve the whole problem. Just if your bucket is an hour a week for 3 months, or it's whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be very obtainable for you. So the book has a place where you develop your 1-year plan. And it's really just based on what you can do. And some people can't do anything right now because of where they're at in life. They've got little kids and they're running around like crazy. Okay, well, maybe then, donate a little bit to something or whatever. We do need money for the specialists, like those people that work with the guy on the subway. You do need specialists for that. It gives you a tool to build a plan that's right for you in this year. And just do it a year at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. Just act.
You know what? Just act. And I've seen that in your own life, Angie. I thank you for your example in that. I've tried to live my life that way, just doing the next thing that God tells me to do.
Yeah.
And the next right thing too, right? Like that's just right in front of you. And I think some of it for me is just being connected in relationships, paying attention to the people that are actually around me. I don't live in the city of Toronto, but I live in a city that there's lots of needs.
Yes.
And if each one of us even pay attention to the people right around us, we're surely going to find a need that, that we can step into. You think about identity, think about purpose. I mean, you've had some beautiful things happen in your life. You have a wonderful husband, Arthur, who also does incredible work with the Catholic Church in the area of, helping people all over the world. But tell us who you are now, Angie, when you look back over that little girl, maybe who felt too small and didn't think she would make such a big difference. And, you were in the neighborhood, felt like, or told maybe you're adopted or you don't have a place. Like, who are you now? Where do you find your security, your value, and your worth?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in Jesus, right? I don't have another explanation for myself or description other than a child of God. And that's probably the strongest identity anyone could have, right?
Yeah.
And I just really feel blessed. That's all. Like for a kid who didn't have any plans for her life, it's turned out really good. So choosing to follow your Ephesians 2:10 is a good plan. It's a good plan.
Yeah.
And I feel very blessed by having chosen to do that.
Well, you've been a blessing and continue to be a blessing to others. And thanks for sharing so personally your story, because a lot of people might know all the things you do, but they might not know really who you are and how really just the beautiful ways that you've been shaped and grown and matured as you've really followed Jesus and loved God. If anybody is looking for Angie's book, where would they find it? Just Act. Where would they find it, Ange?
You can find it Chapters, Amazon. If you want bulk, you can go to my website, www.justact.ca. We give a discount of 10% off orders of 10 books or more.
Okay. And it's a great book for a group. It's a great book for individuals. You could use it in your workplace. I'm just selling it for you right now. Okay. Any last thoughts, Angie, before we wrap up here, what you want to say to people who maybe are looking to find themselves? They feel a little lost maybe in their own purpose.
Yeah, I would just say, you know what, like we are all children of God. There's nobody too small. You're not too small. And you're only too small if you try to do it by yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Like really when you think about it. But if you lean into Jesus, you know that he wants to carry your burden for you. You know he's there for you. And he's got a really good plan for your life. And he's going to equip you to do it. And the beauty of walking in his strength, leading on your knees, having good people around you. Like when I think about you, Lorie, and our little posse of amazing women that, that's huge. Don't go alone. Build your posse. And in that, I know that can sound scary because for a certain season of my life, I was very alone. And what I would say to anybody who feels very alone right now, be brave and reach out to those people that you think are too put together to want to hang out with you and ask for a coffee. Because you know what? You're gonna form some really good relationships.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how we met, over a coffee.
That's right.
And you are a dear friend and have been a mentor to me on many levels, and I thank you.
And vice versa. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure you were inspired. I told you I saved the best till last. But we are going to take a little break from weekly podcast. But thank you again, Angie Peters, for being with us. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Found podcast. I hope you're feeling encouraged and excited to step into everything God has for you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. And if today's show encouraged you, please share it with friends and give us a shout out on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.